Have you ever dreamed of taking that family vacation, but you're worried about how to manage your loved one's dementia away from home? Well, traveling with dementia can feel daunting, but it doesn't have to mean the end of your adventures or even family reunions. Join us as we unlock the secrets to stress free travel with dementia. Our guest, renowned travel expert Adrienne Berg, shares her top tips and tricks to make your journey smooth, enjoyable for everyone. Get ready to discover the joy of travel right here on Fading Memories. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. I hope you are having a great week. You know, I always appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time every week. And this week, we are giving you back travel and adventure. I know for most of us, we'd like to do more traveling, but how do we do that with our loved one who is living with some form of dementia? So today with me is Adrienne Berg. One of the many things she does is she is the host of the Ageless Traveler podcast. And that is obviously for those of us on the older end of the spectrum who are still traveling and still desire to travel. But today we're going to be talking about how to travel with your loved one and if you are going to leave your loved one behind. So thanks for joining me, Adrienne.
Well, as you know, it's a pleasure. I've loved working with you. I've loved having you on my show on the Ageless Traveler. So it's terrific. Thank you for having me here today.
Well, thank you. And I know we really tried to get this done so people could hear it before the holidays, but life does not always work that well. So there's always time to travel if we know what we're doing. So why don't you give us your background a little bit and then we'll just jump right into the discussion.
Well, you know, I've had a very long career in aging. I started as an elder law attorney. And as an elder law attorney, I had the opportunity to start something called NAILA that a lot of your listeners may be familiar with because they're lawyers, if they have any, are members of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. And so for 35 years, I was really working with families, many of whom have are grappling with issues of dementia. Well, at the beginning, what we were all concentrating on was the money. What is it going to cost you? What's the law? But pretty soon, the lawyers got to understand that it was all also about lifestyle and was also about the health of the caregiver. And we began to really focus on what the caregiver needs. And as I got older and wanted to do what I love, which is travel, I decided that I would dedicate this podcast to allowing people to travel, no matter how old they are and no matter what their circumstances. I have a couple of other podcasts. One is for the UN, and one is for aging in general called Generation Bold, the Fountain of Truth About Aging. And I do have to say that I'm in working with National Council on Health and other groups, everyone and every study shows that traveling is part of your own longevity. It really is healthy. So I don't want people to give up this healthy, exciting pursuit just at the time that they thought they would have more and more time to travel.
I think travel is good for you because you're learning, you're exploring, you're challenging your cognitive abilities, for lack of a better term. You know, you may have conversations with people. You're probably having conversations with people who don't have the same worldview as yourself. That's actually a fascinating conversation that I've had in the past is having an actual conversation with people who don't think the same way. This was leaning a little bit more politically. Is actually really beneficial cognitively because you're challenging yourself to, you know, not get judgmental, not get accusatory, but to listen. And so it's really good. It's a really good skill. So I can see why travel would do that for your brain. Plus, we need variety. I don't understand people who are like, I haven't left, you know, this small town in my whole life. It's like, why? Like it might be the best town in the nation, but like
Let's look at it. There are two kinds of people. There are people who go and there are people who don't go. And you cannot make, I have been trying for years, you can't make the people who don't go. What you can do is you can facilitate and support the people who do want to go to make sure they get there. And it's even deeper than that, cognitive. You know, dementia is very complex. But one of the things that the health services in the UK studied was the effect on travel and cognitive ability. And they found something really fascinating. That is that as you get older, they call it self-imposed helplessness. People are told they can't do it, so they don't do it. And they don't do it again, and it becomes a habit of not doing. And once you're told over and over again, you can't snorkel, you can't swim, you can't go on a walk, you can't go on a hike at night, you can't drive at night, you can't, it scares you, you stop doing it. When you travel, you've got to do it. You have to make sure you're packed. You got to get up at a particular time. You have to trust yourself. And apparently, when you do that, you say, gee, I'm so helpless as I thought I was. You're a different person. And it actually changes the neurons in the brain, the pathways, because the brain is plastic. It can get actually healthier and even younger, just like a body can. And you do better and you live longer. So there's that component. I'm in it for the fun. I mean, I'm in it for the Prosecco and for the dinner in Paris and to take a look at art, to be honest with you. But I know in the back of my mind that it's also good for me. And I want it to be good for all the caregivers of the world as well.
Well, let's jump into how caregivers can help facilitate travel with their loved one, because many of us, and this is not incorrect, but most of us learn that, you know, they need like consistency and a routine. And when you disrupt that routine, you know, with holidays or people come to visit, it can really throw them off. So I know the last time my dad traveled with my mom was a disaster. It was a 3-hour trip south to a cousin's wedding. It was my cousin. So what was that, like a whatever? I can't keep all those family tree branches aligned, but it was my cousin's wedding. And my dad was not the best caregiver because he didn't learn. He didn't educate himself on the disease, and he just didn't have patience. And that's not uncommon, unfortunately. So I know my listeners are not in that boat, but my mom would get in the car and like literally within 5 or 10 minutes, just like, where are we going? And it was always kind of that snarky tone of voice, which just, it doesn't take more than twice for it to just really grate on your nerves. My daughter didn't even ask questions like that when she was a kid. You know how like kids like, are we there yet? No, my mom was the one that did that. And I'm sure in 3 hours, my dad probably wanted to put her on the side of the road. So how can we like help prepare a loved one to do something that's, you know, fundamental as attending a family wedding and being able to enjoy it ourselves, but also helping them to enjoy it. So like, well, I guess we'll start with, this is a road trip.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk directly to your audience if I can for a minute, because there's two categories that are going to help you. One of them I call know-how, and the other one I call attitude. So let's talk about the know-how very quickly. The know-how is all the rules and regulations and the laws and the entitlements that support you. There's a lot of them. Whether you're going on a road trip, whether you're going on a train, whether it's an airplane, hotels have to accommodate you in very special ways. And without boring you, I tried to put it all in one book, and there's a free ebook called the caregiverstravelguide.com. You just go there and you have the book. So that's the caregiverstravelguide.com. It's an important resource. And I was very, very thrilled that Fromers, which is a big name in tourism, published our first chapter of it, which is airline navigation with your loved one. So that's all about know-how. And there are a lot of things I could have helped your dad, Jennifer, if he was willing to read it and see all that he was entitled to, including concierge services, free, in train stations and so on. Now that's the know-how. Now we get to the attitude. That's the harder part. And that's what Jennifer is talking about, where you know your person and you know exactly where the barriers are going to be, whether it's having to go to the bathroom a lot and stop, and you have other people with you in the car and they don't want to stop. It's making the trip an hour longer than expected. Well, too bad. There's an app that tells you where all the bathrooms are everywhere in the United States, by the way, on the road. So you know that. You've got that worked out. You speak to the person. You tell them exactly where they're going and why and how, even if you have to say that 100 times. And even if you hear that voice in your head, because I'm sure, Jennifer, that voice, I mean, you're almost like an impersonator. You're like your mother's person. You know exactly what she sounded like. So, and the fact is, we all do. So expect it and have the attitude that this is my priority. My priority is to get there. My priority is to be there and to do the best that we can with it and rolling with the punches. So there is certainly an attitude, but there's a lot of support out there that you're entitled to if you know it. And I will bring one thing up that you brought up on my show, Jennifer, and I love this. And that is, Jennifer was suggesting that if you're in a train or if you're not the driver and you're sitting next to the person who needs care, you get a book. And and I have put this in my show notes to my audience, books that are large enough to cover 2 laps, and you begin to read and you entertain them. So this is what I mean by attitude and planning. And it can be done. My favorite thing, Jennifer, is if everybody who says it can't be done would get out of the way of the people who are doing it, the people who are doing it, be much better off. So yes, it can be done.
Yes, I would like more caregivers and their families to be like my past guest, Tony Copeland Parker. I have a tendency to get his last names reversed. Parker Copeland. He is the author of running around the world and One Footstep at a Time. And he and his partner traveled the globe with her early onset Alzheimer's. And if they can do it for a couple, 2-3 years, like they didn't have a permanent home, they were nomads and traveled everywhere.
Right.
Then we can go to family weddings, graduations, those are coming up. We can take a nice weekend, to the mountains or to the beach or someplace that might offer a little bit of different engagement and a little bit of relaxation, but we need to plan ahead. But for people like me who have tiny bladders, what is the name of that bathroom app? I need that.
Then I'll have to give it to you. You can put it in your show notes.
Definitely. I did not know.
By the way, there's more than one. There's competition. But I have 2 quick stories that you just reminded me of. First of all, we have something on our show called Travel Bros. More women travel than men. It's as simple as that. Solo. I don't mean as couples, but more solo women travel. And more women are finding that their husbands do not want to travel. We just at 63% of all women who travel by themselves are married. So we decided we would encourage men to travel, called Travel Bros. And in doing that, we've discovered a lot of folks who are caregivers, men who are caregivers. And that's one of the reasons they don't travel. So these stories from the gentleman you just mentioned are wonderful, inspiring stories. But the 2 that I did want to say is I went to Australia, a very long trip, the longest trip you could take. And there I met a woman who was a teacher, and she had with her aunt, and her aunt had Alzheimer's, early onset. And I was really blown away by their capability and the way they work together as care recipient caregivers, a team. And I asked the aunt with Alzheimer's if she had suggestions for travel. And this is what she said. She said, take the hard trips first. And
makes sense.
Yes, what she meant when we had that conversation was she always wanted to go to Australia. She always wanted to go to Japan. It was something always on her mind. When she found out that she had Alzheimer's, she's the one that engineered that trip and paid, I had to say, for her companion to go with her, paid for the trip. It was a relative. So if that does happen to you, or if you see that that's happened to your relative, your loved one, or you're a couple, a married couple that always travel, I really do remember those words. Take the hard trips first. Take the ones that you really want to have under your belt. And then after a while, you can start to just do local. And the second thing I wanted to tell you was there's a great book called Passages. In that book, Gail Sheehy, the author, her husband, he got throat cancer. And eventually what they did was they made his food liquid. And they went to Paris restaurants They went all over the world in great restaurants because they were foodies. And they actually liquidated his food. And why am I telling you this? I'm bringing this up because when I go to a cruise, I speak to the food manager immediately because I need low salt. And my husband's diabetic. So if you are traveling with somebody that has culinary needs and you think, oh, we can't go anywhere because of that problem, you'd be surprised that any all-inclusive hotel group, any cruise, any river cruise has a food manager, and any good restaurant has a food manager that will actually accommodate you if you speak to them first. So this is what I mean by know-how. Think about this, learn about it. And by the way, there's a lot of great fallout because a lot of caregivers, like I'm not a caregiver, I'm healthy, but I have high blood pressure. And I have reduced my blood pressure incredibly when I travel using food managers to give me low salt options. It's amazing. I mean, a lot of this is enhancing your own life when you think about travel. And travel does enhance life and it broadens you in so many ways.
I believe that. My daughter has Crohn's disease, so she's got dietary needs that are different. She's pretty good at managing it, but I'm going to mention, like she's in that boat. Her husband doesn't like to travel either. So when she goes with friends, I will tell her to talk to food managers about her needs so she doesn't have a flare up while they're traveling because that's not fun.
Well, you should see how jealous the other people are on the crew. But I go on a cruise. They have a menu, but I get the menu the day before. And I pick and choose everything. I tell them what I want, and I get a better meal. And they're looking, how did she get that? Because know-how, the food manager will give you and work with you every single meal.
Well, it just makes sense. They would like your money, and if providing the nutrition that you need for your health is the barrier, that's a real easy fix to getting you on the ship or wherever and getting your money. I mean, that's what the whole capitalistic society is all about.
Tourism.
So go ahead.
No, tourism is a business. You're absolutely right. We have to hold people to that standard. Now, let's talk in terms of dementia, for example. People are realizing that there is such a thing as dementia travel. That is a word. I think your audience needs to know that is a word in the travel industry. It's dementia travel. You've never heard of it years ago. Today it's everywhere. It's a hashtag in the industry. So there are people who are catering to this. We have on our board a woman, she's from the UK, Carol Sargent. She's a doctor. And her entire business is advising people with dementia how to travel on their own while they still can, or with a caregiver. And she has a big business because this caregiver travel is amazing. Hotels are learning about it. They're learning the difference between someone with dementia and somebody with a physical disability. So this is an open road now. And we've started something called ageless tourism, which is education for the industry on dementia and differing mobilities. This is not just dementia that as you get older, but it's also other mobility issues that could be created. And they're listening. So this is wonderful. It's been a great journey on this one.
That's exciting. So we're taking a road trip that's longer than the 3 hours that my dad took to get to the family wedding. What accommodations are available at hotels that we should know about and be asking for? And what tips do you have for like hotel stays, even if it's just overnight? I know one caregiver that travels quite a bit with her grandmother will go into the room first and put grandma's stuff either on the couch or on the bed so that it looks somewhat familiar to home. So that's a good tip. But what other options do we need to be asking for?
Well, again, a couple of things. First of all, on a longer trip, or even if you've so long that you're going by plane or a train and so on, with regard to accommodations, again, the know-how and the attitude. So the know-how is that across the world, you have rights, specifically with regard to hotels. So we have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, But Europe, the EU, has a very similar act. Throughout Asia, there are individual acts. Wherever you're going to go, you have rights, and those rights include a bigger room, more space, a shower that doesn't have a barrier, many things that you may need. So that's all about know-how and rights. And again, Caregivers Travel Guide tells you everything about hotels. But the attitude I would recommend would be this. There are a lot of what they call residential hotels. Honestly, they're usually the cheaper hotel. Sometimes you'll see in a U.S. chain at the end, it'll say Express, Hyatt Express, Hilton Express, or Suites is another buzzword. What does it mean? It means there's more room. It means that there's a couch. It means that it's bigger, and it usually means that it includes breakfast and at a reasonable rate. These are places that are for long-term stays. Unfortunately, I had to do that for about 3 months when my roof fell in during Sandy when I was living in New Jersey. So this is for long-term stays, but they rent by the day. So these are very good choices, not the five-star hotels, unless that's the only place you'll stay. But I would say that these are great. And just as Jennifer suggests, it looks like home. And the fact is, and of course, don't say I said this. It looks a lot like assisted living rooms and nursing homes.
True.
So it's true. So if you're taking your loved one from a place like that to travel for a reason, it looks similar to their accommodations and brings something, as Jennifer suggested, with you that makes it feel like home. I personally, when I travel, if I'm staying in a place for a long time, I actually buy flowers and put it in the room. That is just a personal thing for me. And I walk in and I feel like I'm home because I am a long-term traveler. So sometimes I'm in one place for 14 days or on a ship for 18 days. And I'll actually have something of my own. So that's across the board. Why wouldn't it be true for a loved one with dementia? It is true.
I have a portable electric kettle because you're not running hot water through the coffee maker and making a good cup of tea. That's my personal little thing that I always bring. It's not very big, and you can stick the cord inside, or wrap the cord around the outside, and you can stick all the tea bags, or it's got its own little storage for when you stuff it in your suitcase. And I'm really good at packing so that I don't have to check my bag because I hate that.
Oh, there is one other little hint and tip. I mentioned the food manager. There's another person in the field of tourism that is hardly understood or known, and that's the concierge. Most people use a concierge at a hotel if they want to see a show. They'll go to the concierge and ask him, can you get me tickets or whatever? That's really not what concierges are trained for. That's important because they make money from that too. But they're really trained to help individual people with their individual needs. So if you happen to be in a hotel that has a concierge, see them also immediately and tell them that you're with someone that has a dementia issue, a mobility issue, and perhaps they do want to see something. Maybe there is a museum. Maybe there is a specialized, many museums now have dementia days even for all-inclusive. Days for autism, days for dementia, days for both. They know this stuff. So you go to them, and the more you ask those things, the more the industry will train them in that direction. And then you probably do know about the sunflower tags, which is our program. Please do look at Sunflower Foundation online. The Photos article that I wrote has a lot of information on this, but it's a tag, and it just, without having to say it, it tells anyone in the tourism industry, because they know what that tag means. It just has a picture of a sunflower, that person has dementia. So they will know simply by having that tag, and they're free from the Sunflower Foundation.
That's good. I'd heard about that a long time ago, and then I think we did talk about it on your show. And the other thing that a lot of people like myself utilize, it's like a little business card that they can slip to a hostess at a, restaurant, so that way you're not announcing to the entire restaurant or, you know, embarrassing your loved one that they have some form of dementia. It's just a little card that says, I'm, you know, my person, or, you know, this is my fill in relationship, and they have Alzheimer's or frontal temporal dementia. I would just say dementia because not everybody understands all the names. But, you know, that just helps, because until people, you know, a lot of times if somebody's getting a little, you know, crotchety, a little, what's the right word? I'm having a brace.
Maybe a little feisty.
Yeah, feisty. That's a good word. And, you know, people get judgmental. It's just how we are, unfortunately. And until we've lived the journey of Alzheimer's, and when I was a photographer, I had really good clients whose they had 3 kids, one of which was very significantly on the autism spectrum. And I had to learn how to work with him to get what his mom wanted and not upset him. And it was very much like dealing with my mom. And, you know, these experiences have allowed me to view, you know, instances of people getting feisty, or, you know, teenagers having meltdowns in the grocery store or whatever, and just assume, well, they might have a cognitive issue. They're not just, you know, some horrific brat, which 15 years ago I might have thought, oh my God, what is with that family? That kid needs a smack upside the head. So having the sunflower lanyard and the little business cards can just really ease things for everybody. And if it's easier for them, it's going to be easier for you. Let me think. So we talked about the concierge. Oh, airports. When I was on your show, you talked about like quiet rooms, which I really wished I'd known about when I came home from New Jersey, because my gate was right directly across from the only children's play area I've ever seen in a airport. And the kids were having a great time, but after a while, I got real tired of listening to the screeching and all the playground noises because I had a long wait from getting dropped off to take off, and I really wish I'd known about those quiet rooms. So,
Right.
for me and the audience.
So this is not just for people with dementia. Everybody really should know this. When I took my mom to Colorado, and I didn't realize she was 90 at that time. And she did not have dementia. I didn't realize how nervous it would make her. It was the height of the time when we were very worried about terrorism. We are again. But this was the real height of it. Everybody had to take off everything. I mean, you were practically dripping. And they were touching you, and you're going through. And she just couldn't see that. Was not in her background. And she was so nervous. Nothing was going on. But, of course, the whole process makes you scared and nervous. So the first thing I tackled was the airport. And with that, and then another reason I tackled the airport was, we talk about family travel and short travel, but a lot of people are traveling for health. So medical tourism is a big thing. And you may meet somebody through an airport because they're going far away for healthcare reasons. So this is all part of it. So all's part of it if people do move. Mom has dementia. She can't run her own home. And she has to move across country to be with you, to live with you. So there are reasons that you often have to go to an airport. So in the free ebook, Caregivers Travel Guide.com, you'll get everything about navigating an airport. But one of the things we tell you is, on your phone app of the airline that you've chosen, you'll find exactly when you should show up. It will tell you. And you don't come too early and you don't come too late. But with somebody with dementia, you come a little earlier. So what do you do with your time? And that's where the quiet rooms come in. Look, they used to be chapels because they converted, most of them have either added a room or converted a chapel. It's still a chapel. Even cruise ships have this too, by the way. All of them have it. It's a quiet room where you go to relax. The other thing they've done is the opposite. They've created entertainment I mean, there's some of the greatest museums, San Francisco Museum of Art has put in 3,000 feet of art in the airport. Here where I live in Palm Springs, it's a wonderful place to go. It's fun. People go to the airport just to have a good time. So much going on there. JFK, I mean, wherever you go, so you can either enjoy a quiet room and just decompress. You can stay away from where the kids are, because they do have loud places too. How do you know that? On the app or website of your airport, it will show you where the quiet room is. It'll show you where the kids' playground is, where the food is. There's massages in some airports. If you want to pay for that, you can get everything else is free. Where the art is. And so if you do decide to come early just to decompress before the ordeal of getting through security, you'll know where to go. So that's just one thing. By the way, some train stations have that. It's really quite something you can use for any kind of transportation with the exception of your own car. So this is all important stuff, and growing and growing and growing.
Well, I'm gonna have to check into that because I'm going to Atlanta in a couple of weeks. And I'm curious to see what the Sacramento International Airport has available, just because it's not very big.
What airline are you using?
Delta.
Delta is, all right. So in Atlanta, Delta is a hub.
Mm-hmm.
So from Atlanta, the Atlanta airport is very rich in these kinds of amenities. There's a lot of food, a lot of art, definitely a quiet room. But don't be surprised if Sacramento doesn't have the same, even though it's small. You can put Palm Springs into a thimble. I mean, that's
true.
Airport. Sacramento is a bigger airport. It's got stuff. You'll see. And you just go to the airport website and start reading. I don't know anyone who goes to the website of the airport, of the airline and the airport, but both of them have a website, and you'll get a lot of information that way.
Well, I'm definitely checking that out. So one last question about traveling with your loved one, and then we'll pivot a little bit to traveling on your own when your loved one is safely where they need to be. You mentioned traveling. This must have been not long after 9/11. I also traveled not long after that. And getting through security it's a hassle for those of us that don't have a cognitive impairment or aren't of a generation where a pat down is, invasive. It's still kind of invasive, but I have TSA pre, so I have less of those hassles. How would you navigate some of that with somebody like your mom? If your mom had dementia, I know you said she had definite age slowing of the brain, typical age-related brain slowing. There we go. I can say the whole thing. But just, I mean, I would get the TSA pre just to avoid having to take off shoes, because what a hassle that is just for yourself, but if you have to help somebody else. So how would you suggest people navigate that?
Well, first of all, just FYI, because I'll be 77, I can tell you that at age 75, you don't need TSA to take off. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to take a lot of things off just because you're 75 years old. And it's a lot of fun because they always say the same thing. Oh, wow, you're 75. And you say, yes, I am. You want to see my passport? So anyway, so there's some things where you don't need TSA, but if you've got a loved one with any mobility issue, or you have, or cognitive issue, first thing you do, and it's got to be at least 2 weeks before you go, is you call TSA, you let them know what's going on. They will send you a notification card that you sign. You'll have it with you. You can give it to anyone in an airport that's staff, and you get a lot of rights. The first thing you get, of course, is, as you see it, not only can you have the cart take you around, but if you have a wheelchair, you will get somebody to wheel that chair for you. If you don't have a wheelchair, they will give you a complimentary. And remember, everything I'm telling you is free of charge. You get a complimentary wheelchair, particularly if you have a wheelchair that folds and you have been able to check it. Now you need another wheelchair just to get you through. You'll have that. Then, of course, you won't have to wait on the line. It'll go right to security. Most of the things you will not have to take off. If you have somebody with dementia, they're not allowed to touch you because that can trigger something. and you'll have your notification card, and you'll go through the security much, much smoother and faster than anybody else. So these are all the things you do using TSA, the notification card, and that lanyard also helps a lot. You have a tremendous amount of rights. You have the right to be taken to an accessible bathroom. Not only have an accessible bathroom, which is ADA, but be taken to the accessible bathroom by someone if you wheeling you or driving you. So there's quite a bit of rights that you have if you have the know-how. That's why we put that together in caregiverstravelguide.com and in the Frowers article on caregiver travel.
Well, just as a reminder, that book's going to be linked in the show notes. But I bet you at this point you remember the website because Adrienne's mentioned it plenty of times.
Hard because it's free. There's no, I want people to have it. And there's no way that I can take everybody's time to give all the little details of what you could know from hydration, how to handle the hydration when you travel. That's also important to, as I say, to not only your rights, but who's looking after you. There are a lot of companies that actually embrace dementia travel. They're looking for clients in dementia travel. So you want them to know that too. And luggage. Taking your luggage is difficult when you're dealing with somebody with dementia. You don't have to take it with you. There are hints and tips on how to ship it so that it's there for you. So there's so many aspects of making life easier for you. Now, on your own, going on your own, that's a different story. That's the second part, that we're creating some trips for caregivers. We call them respite care trips, but there's probably a fancier name for it.
I'm not familiar with one.
Yeah, where you finally can get away. What it really means is you finally can get away for a while and concentrate on yourself for a while.
And it's necessary because, as my audience knows, caregiving is, it starts out relatively easy and then it just spirals into 24/7. And, many people feel trapped in their homes because it's difficult to leave with their loved one. And so I'm hoping that some of these tips can be translated into like everyday errands, like just knowing where you can go to the bathroom. Like I travel back to my old hometown to visit my daughter, get my hair cut, go to the chiropractor. I'm actually doing that this week. And, I use the restroom before I leave the house. And sometimes got to stop somewhere. And I stopped once to get gas and asked to use the restroom and they couldn't find the key. And I was like really super irritated because then I had to go somewhere else. And it's like, at this point, it's practically running down my leg. Thank you very much. So, with the challenges that we have in our society, a lot of places are locked. And if you got to wait in line to ask for a key or a code, and it's like sometimes having tiny bladder is a curse. So I do hope the tips help with everyday kind of things because we can always use all that. But I would like people to be able to get away and get respite. So I would think if you Googled dementia travel or respite travel, you might come up with a lot of these companies. Would that be accurate?
Yes, to the first one. If you Google dementia travel, you'll definitely find companies and consultants and advisors. If you Google respite travel, you won't get much. And this is an attitude that's changing, I hope. You might be surprised that there's a stigma. You mentioned stigma of dementia. There's a stigma for people who travel when they have a caregiver loved one. They're not supposed to have a life. You will find people who'll say, what? Her mother has dementia and she went to Japan? What kind of a daughter is that? So if we're really going to talk realistically, the first thing you have to overcome if you're going to be a caregiver and travel on your own once in a while is guilt. And that guilt is going to be doubled down by other people. Not that they may say it to you. It's even a look. The minute you tell Aunt Martha that you're going to Paris, you can get a look that you can feel over the phone. So really, you talk about siblings and so on. So there's a humanistic thing here too. It's not just know-how. It's you have to have the attitude that you deserve it and that you'll be a better caregiver. When you'll be recharged, your batteries will be recharged. You need it for a reason. It's healthy. So that's part one. Part two is money. Many, many caregivers have a financial burden they didn't expect to have.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to spend the money on themselves and go travel. But we have another ebook. I won't repeat it as much, but it's a great book. It's luxurytravelforless.info. And everything we do is free. And it just is hints and tips on how to make travel cheaper so you can actually go. That's the second barrier. Then the third barrier is keeping in touch. And this is really something to dwell on. Look, one way or another, if you go away and you're a caregiver, somebody else is your surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to be there. It either has to be assisted living or nursing home community or an in-home person or another family member. You've made some arrangements for caregiving. And the key to that is to staying in touch. So some of it is easy. If it's your sister, you make a phone call and you FaceTime and you do that sort of thing. But if it's an assisted living community, they may not be as responsive to you, letting you know what's going on all the time. You have to be very clear to them that you're going to be away for 3 weeks. It doesn't mean, and that's a long time. I'm not expecting people to go for 3 weeks, but they might. And we're going to be away for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. We need to know on a daily basis a little report. And you'll say, what? Well, let me tell you, that's what daycare centers do. They actually send a report home every single day. There is no reason that in the interim, it's not like you're traveling and asking them for 352 reports. You're asking them for a report every day or every other day. And the day that you don't get the report, you know that at a certain time you're going to call in and buzz in. So those are just low-tech things that you can do. There are high-tech things that you can do as well to keep in touch and be able to monitor what's going on visually with the right, what they call age tech applications, usually on a phone. So there are a lot of ways for you to stay in touch, know what's going on, be on top of it, and they'll give you peace of mind also. So those are some. And of course, one of the things that is happening is caregivers, mostly women, I must say, are getting together and traveling together, but without their loved ones, and just enjoying. Well, they call them wellness weeks. Respite week feels a little clinical. I like the word wellness week, but it's searching for a word because this is so new. And we have them in Palm Springs. We have caregiver wellness weeks right here. And you have your soaking tubs and you have the beautiful weather and you have the food, get together. And there are sightseeing groups for caregivers. And the one we're putting together is going to Africa. It's a safari week. It's a safari week because that's a big bucket list thing for most people. So, yes, it's all available to you, but the key is your own peace of mind. The key is your own peace of mind. And that you get through technology and you get through pre-preparation to make sure that that your surrogate caregiver knows what they're doing.
That makes really good sense. And I'm interested in the safari trip. Maybe not this year. I have an HVAC system that needs to be replaced, unfortunately. And, that's not cheap. But I'm interested in the ebook luxurytravelforless.com.
No, .info. That's the
.info, okay.
I couldn't get .com. I wish I could have gotten that. It would make everybody's life easier.
Yeah, but info makes sense. And that will be linked in the show notes as well, everybody. And I'm interested in that just because I am a super frugal girl. I appreciate really good meals, but I don't want to take the last bite and then be presented with the $200 or $300 bill because now I don't have that nice meal anymore. I'd rather make my own nice meals most of the time, but I do want to go places and doing it affordably makes it more enjoyable for me. So
it does. I like what they call in Britain value for money.
Mm-hmm.
Value for money. So I have to tell you that I travel, as I said, many months out of the year, and I travel generally with my husband. So that's the price of two people.
Mhm.
And I travel cheaper than anyone I know. I have many friends that are all travelers, and I actually get heart attacks just watching and hearing what they spend. I can't believe it. I don't even know how you could do that. And why? Well, because they go on the highest end packaged tours. And I can tell you that I think we went to South America for quite a while, and it's about $5,000, $6,000. And I asked my friend, she went for a week with her husband. She spent $20,000.
Ugh, that's a lot of money.
So I got moved. This is the kind of thing that moves me to do this luxury travel for less, that info. But I'll give you one example. A lot of it does have to do with watching airfares and how to be alerted to the cheaper airfares, watching the hotels and how to be alerted. A lot of it has to do with seasonality, going in certain seasons that are off seasons. But then there's also a lot of hints and tips. For example, I actually love water travel, cruising, and I like river cruises. But there are ways of making them much, much cheaper. People don't know that there's such a thing as canal travel. It's beautiful. It's a fraction of the price. So that's just, one little example. They don't know that if you're really going on big trips, that there's such a thing as freighter travel. That's a really important thing, too. It's beautiful, the transatlantic. And they're catering to consumers. So it depends on how you want to travel, what accommodations you must have, and that sort of thing. I do like a good hotel, but you have to know the difference. And sometimes the difference between a 4 or a 3-star and a 5-star is nothing that you really want.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing.
I'm trying to teach my husband that as long as it's clean and comfortable, that's like, I don't need views. I'm not there. I'm not staying in the hotel room for a view. I'm not there. It's nice if they have the little breakfast buffet, but that's not 100% necessary. But yeah, we went. One of the trips we took while my mom was in memory care was we went to spring training, and our friends were putting the trip together, and she was explaining how the hotel prices go dramatically up during spring training. That's a surprise, right? And when she mentioned the prices, I, of course, was like, oh, Lord, that's just too much for a hotel. She's like, oh, I could look for cheaper hotels. And I'm like, oh, no. Mr. John prefers the 6-star hotels, which, of course, made her laugh. And so, yeah, there's that discrepancy. And it's, even, some of the 5-star hotels in Paris had bed bugs just because that became a huge problem. So it's not like a 5-star hotel is going to protect you from all of those incidences. So, but I have to ask, freighter travel, is that actually on a freight ship? Blah.
What they've done now, there's plenty of freight.
As I say, that sounds awful.
I know that. Freighter travel, let's talk about it for a minute. There are different reasons that people want to travel. One of them is adventure. And caregivers are a variety of people. I mean, there's no one type of caregiver, right?
Right.
So we have many that simply want the wellness trips and give me my massage and my pina colada, and I'm a happy camper. There are others who want to see as many museums and shows as they could possibly get in. And I call that the culture vulture trips, right? And there are others that really want to go on an adventure. And they may even want to go by themselves, because most of those who cater to the respite are having groups together. But some caregivers may want solitude. Now, freighters are made for that. They are specifically made for consumers to be on a freighter. So they have full meals. You eat together almost like in a communal table if you've gone to fancy fresh food restaurants. Some of those have the community tables now. Well, that's what a freighter is like. It's not like a cruise ship where there are individual tables for two. You'll eat together, not with the crew, but with other folks. There are very frequently very few people on the boat. They usually have a dozen passengers. And they do have a route. You know exactly where you're starting and exactly where you're going. You're not going to get a show and entertainment. So if you take your freighter, you bring your book, your pile of books with you that you love to read, and you're getting somewhere. But a lot of people do it just for the journey. They love the journey. They love the ports. The ports are totally different. They just like it a lot. We went to, for a good example is Brisbane. I was just in Brisbane, Australia. Now, Brisbane, Australia, unlike Melbourne, Australia, it's a freighter port. Even if you're on a cruise ship, you're going into a freighter port. And therefore, it's far from Brisbane. You have to be able to get into Brisbane. Melbourne, not a problem. Take a taxi and go. So you have to know that if you're interested in sightseeing after the freighter docks, where the port is. And these are all little details that I explain. But yeah, it's very inexpensive, and it can be a great, one of the life's great adventures. And there's plenty of people who've written great travel books about their freighter travel as well. That's just one example, one small thing. Now, another thing that's really important is, where do you decide to go? If you go to Italy, that's one story. If you go to Malta, you may be going to places that is just as beautiful, just as wonderful, at a fraction of the cost. So you're getting an experience, very high-end experience, at a mid-range cost. What we're doing with Africa, Africa is very expensive. Safaris can be really expensive if you engage them here in the U.S. What we're doing is we're going directly to the African tour operators and the tourist boards in Africa, and they're putting the trip together. So it's a fraction of the cost if you from tour operators here in the U.S. And it's on the ground, it's local, and it's different, and it's very, very, very adventuresome. So, but it's very affordable. Because remember, I'm always grappling with the fact that I travel for very long periods of time. So I have to really get down those costs. And what I know, I let my listeners and the agents traveler know.
Well, that's awesome. First off, you've sold me on freighter travel at least once, because I like variety, which is kind of funny because I also love leftovers. But I'm not a big cruise person because I don't want to be on a big boat with that many people. It's not my idea of travel. So I can see freighter travel, and I have read quite a few things on going to different places than like the big tourist areas. Like some of the big tourist areas are almost like tourist traps, and they're not that enjoyable. They're packed and they're expensive, and so I'm excited to download the luxurytravelforless.info.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things of my concern with the caregivers is this. It's not as easy as it if you don't have that responsibility. Let's face that fact. So you want to choose wisely, like Indiana Jones, choose wisely. Don't listen to where everybody else wants to go. Go where you want to go. Because you may have 1 or 2 trips to everybody's 5 trips. So you really don't stint on your okay. If you can take a lot of trips like I do, great. Then go for the money, go off season, and do it. But if you're going to take 1 trip a year, and that's about all you can do to get away, go where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then look at the most economical, value-driven way to do it. But don't stint on location. If you always wanted to see the Great Wall of China, or you always wanted to see the Taj Mahal, or you always want to see Mount Rushmore to get home, my mom always wanted to see Mount Rushmore, go there. And then we'll figure it out. And don't forget, I have a way where people can ask me questions. They can text me, and questions free, and voicemail me questions free, and I answer them. So if you're doing something, we're there. We're a resource. I have 8 people who have resource information in different areas of tourism, in addition to myself, answering questions through our podcast, The Ageless Traveler. So, if you are planning and you say, well, where should I stay in Tokyo? I'll tell you where to stay in Tokyo.
Awesome. Well, I hope we've made traveling with your loved one and traveling as a caregiver without your loved one more doable. And maybe we've even given you some ideas for tips for just some everyday, got to get errands done and how to navigate some of this stuff. So I really appreciate Adrienne for coming on my show. I'm linking her show in the show notes so that you can hear our conversation and others over there. And definitely take advantage of the free ebooks because, man, they sound great. And once again, thank you, Adrienne.
Been my pleasure as always. Thank you, Jim.